Welcome to the Berkshires Gone By, history and folklore about the westernmost and most beautiful county in Massachusetts. I'm your host, Brooke. Harry Messenger was a small boy growing up in Washington, Massachusetts. It was there, at the age of 13, in 1898, that he began to keep a diary. This diary still exists and offers us an interesting glimpse into the daily life of a child of that era in the Berkshires. There are, in fact, two versions of his journal, one published in a book called Washington, Massachusetts, 1777 to 1977, Our 200th Year, the History of the Town of Washington, Massachusetts, compiled and edited by Mrs. Louis Elliott. The other is readable on the website Digital Commonwealth by searching the name Harry Messenger. Messenger is spelled M-E-S-S-E-G-E-R. This version was copied from the original journal by someone who claims to have transcribed the diary after it was lent to this person by Harry's family. But this person does not mention their own name, so I'm not certain who undertook this task. Both versions of the journal include some of the same things, but also have things that the other does not. I thought about splicing them into one, but the entries are organized by year, not specific date, so I would have ended up putting some events in an order that they did not actually occur. So I decided to choose one or the other, and I chose the one that was published in the book about Washington history. That's the one you'll hear today. So today, what I'm going to do is read them to you, the big events and the small, all captured to create a portion of his life. You'll notice a discrepancy in dates. It goes from 1898 to 1889. It may have been a slip of the pen, maybe messy ink when being transcribed into this historical book that I'm reading from, but I will read it as is. So without further ado, here is the diary of Harry Messenger. My old big sled was made, February 1898. Lyman Jordan gave me a violin, March 2nd, 1898. I tapped the big maple, March 14th, 1898. Sap, run good. George Sanders gave me a violin, March 22nd, 1898. Aggie Watson took a picture of the school, April 28th, 1898. Mart Regan gave me $1 for a violin bow, May 22nd, 1898. Dave Watson and I went fishing, June 11th. He caught 26 fish. I caught 48. October 18th was Grandpa's birthday. He was born in 1815. Victor Tier burnt sap sprouts for fun. February 21st, 1899. We all went over to Mr. Jordan's, April 5th, and had a fine time. Largest hailstorm I remember was June 24th, 1899, half as big as a hen's egg. Had a fine time over at Mr. Watson's, July 4th, 1899. Church was started at Crane's house, August 6th, 1899. The first dance I ever danced was at Mr. Jordan's on August 18th, 1899. The stone corner of St. Andrew's Church was laid September 4th, 1899. The Cranes gave everyone some tea and something to eat. Uncle Myron bought me a set of fiddle strings October 11th, 1899. Uncle Myron brought me home a bicycle November 4th, 1899. The first eclipse I ever saw was December 16th, 1899. We put up the drilling machine January 20th, 1900. There was a dance the 21st of February, 1900 at Fred Schultz. All had a nice time. We all went over to Mr. Watson's February 24th, 1900. Danced. Mr. Watson had a party May 9th, 1900. The first service held in St. Andrew's Church was June 3rd, 1900. Reverend Mr. Charles Lewis was the minister. The first party Cranes had up here was July 21st, 1900. St. Andrew's Church was dedicated June 15th, 1900. There were about 200 people there. Uncle Myron had a heifer killed by lightning June 28th, 1900. Went over to Mr. Winslow's to see fireworks July 4th, 1900. It was nice. A picture was taken of the choir at church July 8th, 1900. Went to a party at Mr. Crane's July 21st, 1900. About 100 people there. The first bee tree I ever saw was on August 13th, 1900. Took about 40 pounds. In March, about 2 feet of snow came, and in April, 1 foot. I went to a show in Beckett, June 18th, 1908. I went to a dance at Mr. G.F. Crane's on July 1st, 1908. I danced 14 sets. I went over to Mr. Culver's in the afternoon, Thanksgiving Day, November 24th, 1910, and was there to supper. The first deer hunting around here was from November 21st till November 26th, 1910. Quite a few people shot deer around here during the week. I got a good many presents Christmas, 1910, 17 or 18. The loveliest was a watch fob with a locket and pictures. January 1911 was a good month for chopping wood, as there was no snow. Uncle George and I cut 30 cords of wood in 6 days, or 42 hours, for Mr. J. Watson. I had quinsy sore throat the 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th of July, 1911. For 3 days I couldn't eat. Miss Mildred Culver and I went to Pittsfield March 11th, 1911, and stayed at her sister's overnight. We were going to go to a show, but there was nothing but standing room left, so we didn't go. We went to the moving picture place instead. March 12th was Sunday, and we went to church at the Methodists in the morning and to the Baptist church at night. It was the first time we ever were in the Baptist church in Pittsfield. It was fine. There were 30 men sang in the choir at the start, then 4 sang, and then the regular choir about 20 or 24. The Methodist Church in Washington put up its new bell, and first one March 15th, 1911. It weighs 800 besides the framework. Miss Mildred Culver and I went to the Empire Theater March 22nd, 1911, and had a nice time. The winter of 1910 and 1911 I caught 17 rabbits, 3 white ones and 14 gray ones, and also 2 skunks and 1 muskrat. We made 70 gallons of syrup in 7 days, in April 1911. We had about a foot of snowfall April 8th, 1911. About 2 inches April 19th, 1911. Sam Tier and I went over where Pittsfield is building the Farnham Dam, April 19th, 1911, and saw all they were doing. They had lots of machinery there and boilers. There were 5 boilers on the job, 2 more to come, also a steam saw and air compressor. Miss Mildred Culver and I drove to Peru to look at a farm, May 7th, 1911. We had a fine ride, and a lovely time when we got home. She and I went to the Baptist church April 30th, 1911, in the evening. It was the first time I ever saw people baptized by immersion. 7 or 8 were baptized then. We came home on the 10 o'clock train. Miss Mildred C. and I went to Pittsfield May 14th, 1911 on Sunday, and went to a moving picture show for the benefit of an Italian church. It was nice, too. I went to work for Mr. Frank Chappell on the Whitney Place, May 11th, 1911. Got a new knife May 13th, 1911 with tobacco tags. I commenced to go to school when I was 5 years old, and finished when I was most 15. Could play on the harmonica when I was about 7 years old. Had a violin given to me March 2nd, 1898. Another March 22nd, 1898. Got a mandolin December 24th, 1902. A harmophone, July 15th, 1903. Got an accordion, September 10th, 1903. The ocarina, March 18th, 1903. The Little Joe, May 28th, 1904. The first theater show I went to was March 17th, 1903 in Dalton. The first I rode on the steam car was March 17th, 1903. I bought an American harp, August 3rd, 1906. Had a banjo given to me, February 11th, 1907. Another violin given to me in 1909 by Annie. Went to Boston August 10th, 1904, on an excursion with Uncle George. The first circus I went to was Barnum and Bailey in Pittsfield on June 25th, 1903, with my mother. Went next to Walter Main's show on July 3rd, 1903, Pittsfield, with Cousin Jenny. The next time was on May 12th, 1904, to the Adam Forepaugh Circus. Went to church in the French church with Victor sometime in October 1904. Went to the church in Hinsdale on April 30th, 1905, Catholic. The St. Andrew's Church in Washington was built in the year 1899. The cornerstone was laid September 4th, 1899. Services were held the next spring, 1900. Went to evening service at the Valley Church, April 20th, 1906. And a very sad evening was March 31st, 1907. There was a graphophone entertainment at the Valley Church that bad night, April 6th, 1907. I was registered and had my name on the voters list March 30th, 1907, and voted April 8th, 1907, for the first time. Had the mumps, 1906, from April 8th until the 15th. 1907 was a rather queer year, beginning with January. It was cold, and also February, but March was warm. The last part of March was 70 degrees in the shade some days. The 1st of April was some colder but pleasant. On the 9th and 10th, there was about 18 inches of snow came, and about as cold as January. Went to Springfield from Pittsfield, in an engine on an express with Victor Tier, August 16th, 1907, and August 11th, we went to Mount Tom Holyoke and to the Summit House. Miss Mildred Culver went with me to a dance at Mr. Crane's on time. Went to North Adams to a fair, September 20th, 1807. Miss Mildred Culver and I went to the top of Mount Greylock, June 14th, 1808. We walked up from Cheshire Harbor to the top in 2 hours, a distance of 5 miles, and came down in 1 hour and 45 minutes. We had a nice time and a lovely trolley ride from Hinsdale to Pittsfield and Cheshire. Miss Mildred Culver went with me to a dance in Hinsdale at Mr. Leonard's on May 22nd, 1908. I furnished the music. Also to Mr. Plant's, November 13th, 1908. And to Mrs. Fessel's, October 23rd, 1908. And to Mr. Billedois, October 29th. And to Mr. Grainer's, November 27th. And again, January 1st, 1909. A load from Washington took a sleigh ride to West Pittsfield on December 31st, 1908, to a dance at a Mr. Brandt's. We were out all night, or rather, did not go to bed any time until January 2nd, 1909. There were 8 of us from here, and we had a lovely time. I went to Springfield with Victor Tier, December 16th, 1908, and to Hartford also. We came back December 17th, 1908, and had a fine time. The first black suit I ever had, I bought January 16th, 1909. There was a sleigh ride from Washington to Hinsdale on February 3rd, 1909. There were 16 of us. We went from Hinsdale to Pittsfield by trolley, and then we went and saw some moving pictures in the place called The World in Motion. Mildred was sick on the trolleys, or didn't feel very good, also Fanny and Eva Simmons. I went to a social at Mr. Irvin Pomeroy's on January 19th. We all went down to Mr. Kutz's on February 9th, and had a fine time. The first poverty social I went to was at Mr. Carl Pierce on February 12th, 1909. Played for the dance at Mr. Plant's on February 19th, 1909. Mildred couldn't go. It was an awful wet night. February 29th, 1909, I played for a dance at Mr. Addison Beach's, and all had a good time. There were about 65 there. They danced in 3 rooms, and about 18 or 20 sets. Charles Engwer took a load of people up there, 9 besides himself. The ride was nice. The first box social I ever went to was Mr. Frank Coy's on March 2nd, 1909. I went down to Mr. Lyman's sawmill March 8th and saw different machinery work. Mr. Victor Tears started to rise a mustache in March 1909. The second box social I went to was at Mr. John Nelson's on March 23rd, 1909. I played for a dance at Mr. Nathan Jenks on March 16th, 1909. Ben Sanders played on the organ also, Mr. W. Beals with me. The first balloon I ever saw was 1906, sometime in fall. Since then I have seen quite a number. I saw 4 in 1908. In 1909 I saw 5, up till May 21st. In 1908 I caught 758 fish. Trout, perch, bullheads, pickerel, and pumpkin seeds. In 1908 we had 45 loads of hay on our place. We had 7 loads of oats, 2 loads of wheat, 1 of barley, 36 bushels of apples, 93 potatoes, 90 bushels of turnips, 135 of corn. I saw another balloon, May 25th, 1909. May 29th I went with Mr. Culver from his place to Windsor. I led 2 cows for him. We left at 6:30 and got to Jordanville at 11. Then we went home from there to Windsor and stayed overnight. The next day we came home through West Cummington and back to Hinsdale and home. It was a fine trip and I saw a lot of the world. June 4th, Miss Mildred Culver and I went up to Ashley Lake fishing. We had a lovely time. Andrew and his wife and Fanny were there also. I played for a dance at Mr. Dewey's on May 31st. Miss Mildred Culver and Fanny and I went to Pittsfield to see Cole Brothers Circus on June 11th, 1909. We all saw a balloon on June 15th, 1909. We shingled our barn on the west side June 14th, 15th, 21st, 23rd, and 25th. It took 10,000 shingles. I helped Mr. Culver shingle one side of his woodshed, June 24th, 1909. It was an awful hot day. July 5th, 1909, Miss Mildred Culver and I went up to the top of Mount Greylock and back. We walked up in about 2 hours. We rested a while, about halfway up. When we came back down, it only took about 1 hour and 40 minutes. We had a fine day of pleasure. On our way home, on the train, we saw a hot air balloon go up from Dalton. One went up also from Washington at night. July 20th. Uncle George and I helped Mr. John Watson. He had a sale of Jersey cattle, about 80 head in all. One bull brought $200, and a cow brought $220. A little calf brought $50. There were quite a large number of men from far-off places. One man bought 8 head and paid $700 for them. I saw a balloon on July 20th, 1909 from Mr. Watson's. July 23rd, 1909, I went over to Andrew and Grace Culver's to a dance. Miss Mildred Culver went with me, and we had a lovely time. We danced 12 sets and 2-stepped some. There were about 24 or 26 there. We danced until 2:30. July 24th, Uncle George, Annie, Jenny, and I went up to Ashley Lake fishing. We only caught 20 fish. July 28th, 1909, a party of 7 of us went up to the top of Mount Greylock. They were Mr. Fred and Charles Westfall, and Sister Emma, Mr. Charles Engwer, Miss Fanny Culver, Miss Mildred Culver, and myself. We were taken to Hinsdale by team, and then went by trolley from there. It took us 2 hours and 30 minutes to climb the mountain, and 1 hour and 40 minutes to come down. We all went to the top of the tower also. We came back and stopped at Pontusic Lake, and rode on the steamer. We had a fine time. July 30th, we all went to a grown-up children's party at Berth's. There were about 25 there, and all dressed like young children. August 3rd, 1909. There was a lawn party at the parsonage. There were over 50 people there. It was a very good time. August 23rd, 1909. Uncle Myron and George and I drove a flock of sheep down to New Lenox. We were 2 hours and a quarter. I never had been there before. I went from there to Pittsfield. A man gave me a ride from there up to the post office. He was an agent for real estate. August 25th, 1909 was my birthday. I worked all day. Mama gave me 4 pairs of socks and a pair of garters. In the evening, I went over to Mr. Culver's. Mildred gave me a necktie and a tie clip. I got 5 birthday postals. They had cake and ice cream in honor of the day for me. I commenced to work on the State Road, near the railroad, August 30th, 1909, and broke stone 10 days as my job. September 5th, I saw a balloon real close by, the closest ever yet. Miss Mildred Culver and I took a trolley ride from Pittsfield to Bennington on Sunday, September 19th, 1909. It was a lovely trip. We were in the bottom of the monument, but did not go up it. We came back and stopped at Berkshire Park a while. It was a lovely day, all day. I saw a balloon September 29th, 1909. We were cutting corn. It came from Pittsfield. September 30th, Miss M. Culver and I went to the Great Barrington Fair. We had a nice time, and a long ride. She had never been that way before. It was 27 miles from Pittsfield. It took over 2 hours each way. On October 8th, 1909, Annie and I picked up and sacked 12 bushels of potatoes for Ed Morgan in 23 minutes. November 6th, 1909, I and Mildred went to Springfield and spent the day. We went down on the 9:30 train and back on the 7. We went over across the old trolley bridge and back. I walked through the courthouse. We went into quite a few different stores and had a fine time all day. Uncle Myron and George and I commenced to build a wagon shed, November 3rd, 1909, and put it up, boarded, and shingled it. In about 2 weeks, it is 33 feet by 19 feet. November 24th, I had 3 teeth pulled in Pittsfield by the King Dental Company by their painless process. It didn't hurt hardly at all, not enough to mention. The New England Telephone Company put up their line from Endy's to C. Sanders's on November 27th, 1909, until December 2nd, and they put in the phone on December 8th, 1909. I started to read the Bible through on January 6th, 1909, and finished both the Old and New Testaments on December 13th, 1909. I read as near as possible to 23 chapters a week. I bought 9 pieces of furniture December 13th for $5.50. We had 47 loads of hay, 200 bushels of potatoes, 3 loads of oats, 75 bushels of apples, 5 loads of squash and pumpkin, and 48 or 9 loads of brakes. Also 4 loads of hay from beaches. I caught 253 fish in the year 1909. We had a blizzard here on Christmas 1909. It started to snow on Christmas Day, December 25th, and kept snowing until night of the 26th. Then it blew the snow into drifts, so that the roads weren't open until the 27th. There was about 2 feet of snow came, and I was over to Mr. Culver's to Christmas, and it was so stormy that I couldn't go home until Monday the 27th. It was the biggest snowstorm I ever saw. The first cornet I ever saw was January 23rd, 1910. I was over to Mr. Culver's. It was on Sunday. February 6th and 7th were about the coldest days that I have known for a long time. It was 24, 20, 18, and 22 degrees below zero in places here in town. I was out for a walk at from 8 till 8:45 February 6th, 1910, but didn't freeze. Spring came awfully early in 1910. The frost was nearly all out by April 1st. Lots of people have plowed in March in town. Uncle Myra and I went to Mr. McNerney's auction on April 16th, 1910. I had quite a lot of fun. It was the second one I ever was at. There were over 100 people there. They sold some furniture and dishes. I didn't buy anything. Mrs. Culver, Fanny, Mildred, and I went over to the auction at Monroe, Watkins, on April 27th, 1910. It was the biggest one I ever went to. There was lots of furniture and dishes. I bought a few things there. Mr. F. Creamer was auctioneer and did fine. The sale started at 10:30, and it lasted till almost dark. We left at 4:30, and they were selling out yet. May 1st, 1910. There was 2 Russians killed in the ledge, and a Polander badly hurt. I went down on the tracks and saw the pieces of them along the rails. They were about 2 rods above the ledge lobby toward the depot. They were killed by a freight of 24 cars. Their hats were on the engine, clear to Springfield. Miss Mildred Culver, Fanny, Mr. Culver, and I went to Beckett to a drama, The Clouds of War, May 5th, 1910. It was quite nice. We had to have separate seats as the hall was crowded. They took in $84. It was for the Baptist Church. I got up at 2:39 May 17th, 1910 to see Halley's Comet. I saw it quite plain, but couldn't see any star to it. Miss Mildred Culver and I went to Pittsfield to a show in the Empire, May 14th, 1910. It was fine. We drove to Hinsdale and left the horse there, and took the trolleys out and back. The play was Miss Eva Fay. It was a good one, too. We got home at 2 in the morning, had a dandy ride on our way home. There were 2 dances in the hall, one May 6th and one May 20th, 1910. Both were poor times, and most of the few that went were drunk. Uncle Myron, George, and I put up almost 100 rods of woven wire, May 21st, 1910. We all saw Halley's Comet plain, May 28th, 1910. We saw it the 26th and 27th also. Mama saw it first of any of us in the West. It showed at about 8 o'clock at night and until about 11. Miss Mildred Culver and I went to Bennington, May 30th, 1910. We went to Pittsfield the night before, so as to start early from there. It took about 2 hours and a half to go there from Pittsfield by trolley. I went up as far as people are allowed to in the monument. I was up about 200 feet, I guess. We had a fine time and a fine ride. We saw a grand parade in North Adams, too, on our way up. June 7th, 1910. I went to Pittsfield to see a circus, but Victor Tier asked me to go to Albany with him. I rode out in the baggage car and came back in the fireman's seat. Vic ran the train. We left at 3:15 and got to Albany at 5. Then we walked over across the trolley bridge and up to the Capitol and through it. Then we rode back across the Hudson River on the trolleys. Then we started from the yard for the depot at 7:15, left the Albany station at 8:15, and were in Pittsfield at about 10. I saw a lot of the country and places. I found a crow's nest, June 9th, 1910, with 5 crows in it. I went to work on Summit Bridge, June 28th, 1910, at $2.40 a day. They took the old bridge out, July 9th, 1910. Bert Kent's team ran away, July 8th, and one had to be killed. Its back was broken. Miss Mildred Culver and I went to Pittsfield, July 4th, 1910, for the day. We had a fine time. We saw the parade, and it was fine. Then we went to Berkshire Park and saw the sights. Then we came back and saw moving pictures. We went to see an Ascension, but the balloon got a hole torn in it, so it didn't go at all. Victor gave me a bicycle, July 4th, 1910. The Summit Bridge concrete was started July 11th, 1910 at 3 p.m. I dumped the first wheelbarrow full, and some of it struck 2 men below. It cut one man's hand some bad. It was an accident, and the boss's fault as well as mine. Mr. A. Smith gave me a pass, July 16th, 1910. July 17th, 1910, Miss Mildred Culver and I went to Albany on the train. I had a pass, so I had no fare to pay. We went to Albany and looked around some, had dinner, walked through the Capitol. Then we went and called on her uncle and aunt in Rensselaer. We stayed there an hour, I guess. Then we walked over across the river again to Albany and had our pictures taken. Then we came home on the 8 o'clock train. We had a fine day and saw lots of the country. Miss Mildred Culver and I went to Pittsfield, July 24th, 1910, and on the 10:30 express to Springfield. Then we went to Mount Tom by trolley and looked around. Then we came back and walked across the river twice. We came back to Pittsfield on the train 23 express, and then back home. We got home at 10:15 and had a nice day's pleasure. July 31st, 1910, we went to Stockbridge and had dinner, then went to Great Barrington and back to Pittsfield. Then we went up to Pontusic Lake and then back home. We rode on the steamer on the lake. September 5th, I went down to Old Home Day at the grove near the schoolhouse. There were nearly 200 people there. It was a nice time with speaking and singing. Mama, Uncle George, and I were all that went from here. Miss Mildred Culver and I went to Middlefield Fair September 8th, 1910, and had a nice time. I bought a magnifying glass September 8th, 1910. I went to Pittsfield September 16th, 1910. Victor Tier gave me an overall suit, jacket, and overalls. I caught a muskrat in a trap October 5th, 1910, the first one I ever caught. Mama gave me 10 10-cent pieces for my birthday present August 25th, 1910, my 25th birthday. October 30th, Miss Mildred Culver and I went to Warrenoko and called on Mr. and Mrs. Drum. We went down on the noon train and back on the 5 o'clock. We had a lovely time all the day, and the loveliest when we got home. That's where Harry's diary ends. But of course it's not the end of his story, only the spot where he stopped documenting it. Newspapers carried on for us. The marriage of Miss G. Mildred Culver to Harry G. Messenger, both of this town, took place at 8:15 o'clock last Wednesday evening, June 21st, 1911, at the home of the bride, the house being prettily decorated with roses and peonies. First death from flu in this section. Mrs. Harry Messenger died following a few days' illness. Leaves, besides husband, one son, Curtis, 6 years old. An addition to the typewritten journal, viewable on Digital Commonwealth, says that she died not long after the birth of their second child, and that the baby passed away close to the date of her own death. Miss Mildred Culver, his would-be wife, was born in 1891 in Lanesboro. In 1914, they had one son, Curtis. She passed away in 1920 of the flu, aged only 29. Her death record lists pneumonia as the underlying cause. Her son was only 5 years old. Harry, however, did not remain single. The first love of his life, yes, was gone, but he found another. 3 years later, in 1923, he met a woman named Victoria Fontaine. They had no children together, but remained married for many happy years. Harry would continue to play music. He also worked for the YMCA camp in Beckett. Then he and his new wife decided to move somewhere warmer, so relocated to Florida. However, not even a year later, he passed away. He was 68 in 1953. His son and widow remained in Florida, though Victoria did remarry to a man named Henry Lee, whom she would return to the Berkshires with to visit family and friends. As you can see, Harry's diary contains wonderful elements of Berkshire history. Mentions of hot air balloons that had become all the rage in the county, visits to Berkshire Park, the Great Barrington Fair, traveling circuses, hikes up Greylock, trips to the Bennington Monument, trolley cars, the names of people, parties, the railroad, and lots of fishing. Elements of a single life that color our greater history. This has been The Berkshires Gone By. Created, recorded, edited, and read by myself, Brooke Renier, and co-produced by Deanna Garner. You can find us by visiting our website, www.theberkshiresgoneby.com, where you can find all of our episodes and images related to every topic. You can also find images from Berkshire history by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I try to post every day. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. Thanks for listening.